Coming up on episode 76 of the Behind the Back podcast, the Kings traded De'Aaron Fox to the San Antonio Spurs, and now the Kings have Zach Lavine. Ben and I will talk about all the trade details and what we're looking for with now that we have Zach Lavine in Sacramento. And then we pivot on over to the Super Bowl Sunday, Philadelphia Eagles, Kansas City Chiefs. We break down all the matchups we're looking forward to and what the Eagles need to do to secure a victory. With that being said, y'all, let's get it. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back podcast. We are your hosts. I am Marcos Conan Negron, and beside me here, as always, is Ben, the Jet. Rets, Ben, it's Super Bowl week, and I don't want to say the other thing just yet, but how are you doing?
I'm good, man. It's like you said, it's Super Bowl week. We're getting ready for the biggest game of the season, and we got a lot to talk about.
That's right. So, obviously, for those who heard the intro, we got some juicy news and some sad news to talk about. So, let's break down the details of what happened here. Ben, Sacramento, we lost our son, De'Aaron Fox. He has now been traded to the San Antonio Spurs, and that happened yesterday in wake of what was another monumental trade with the Luka Doncic, Anthony Davis trade that popped out of nowhere. So, Ben, I'll let you break down the details of the trade, and if you could, I want to just hear how you're feeling now that Fox is officially gone.
So full details are the Spurs got De'Aaron Fox and Jordan McLaughlin. The Kings get Zach Lavine, Sidi Sissoko, 3 first-round picks, including the 2025 Charlotte, 2027 San Antonio, and 2031 Minnesota. 3 second-round picks, 2025 Chicago, 28 Denver, and 28 we get our own back. And the Bulls get Zach Collins, Trey Jones, Kevin Huerter, and their own 2025 pick. Now, if I were to tell you, without really getting into the nitty-gritty details, that we got 3 first-rounders back for Fox along with Zach Lavine, I'd be like, hey, that's a heck of a return. Like, this is nice. I'll take that. That's a win. But the part that gets me, before I get into how this trade makes me really feel, is our 2025 Charlotte first rounder is basically going to turn into a second round pick because it's protected 1 through 14. So if Charlotte lands anywhere in the top 14, which they will because Charlotte is terrible, we don't get that pick. We'll land in the second round. So that's essentially a wash. Now, our 2027 San Antonio first rounder is probably going to become a late first rounder because they'll be not necessarily contending. They could be contending, but at the very least, they'll be a playoff team. So it'll be probably past the first 15 picks. And then the 2031 pick is 6 years away, Marcos. I mean, we're going to be talking about it in 5.5 years, talking about this is the pick. This is the one. You remember that guy who was a freshman in high school? Well, here we are, not even a freshman in high school yet. So, yeah, the trade. So that's the details. The trade is upsetting because De'Aaron Fox was a part of this organization for 8 years. We saw this kid come in at a very young age and leave as a young man, and rather came in as a young man and left as an adult. He's grown up now, and it kind of hits you. You start to remember the day he was drafted. You remember all the buzzer beaters and all these accomplishments that he's gotten along the way. You remember his first all-star selection of what should have been many. You remember his all NBA. Like, all these things kind of hit you when you realize that he's on his way out. And it's kind of a similar situation over in Chicago with them letting go of Lavine. Lavine was there for 8 years as well. And so it's interesting to kind of see this trade go down because these are 2 guys who meant a great deal to their cities, going, in a different direction, hoping that, their careers kind of find a different pattern. For Foxy, this is exciting, and it's a feel-good story because he's been in, really in basketball hell for for the better part of his 8 years here before we started kind of, putting together a real team. But he never really got like a legit chance. And now he gets this bona fide, soon to be superstar, already a star in this league, to play alongside and hopefully contend. Like they're only a few pieces away. And now I get into the frustrating part of this, which is the return for Foxy. We didn't get any of those young pieces that we kind of talked about wanting to get back if this was the direction they wanted to go. We didn't get any young pieces. We got the win now players, or rather the win now player, and some picks that are pretty pointless. It just kind of seems like it's a throw it in the pot and here you go, Sacramento, take it. So it feels like we got fleeced in a way. I don't know kind of how you're feeling about it.
Personally, I think given what happened with the Luka trade, right? I think that what the Mavericks gave up, like got in return for Luka, was obviously just not as much, right? And when you compare that, and I think Sacramento they masterfully did this at the best time for them because they kind of got to use that Luka thing as being like no one's going to really talk about Fox as much as they're going to talk about Luka. For the Spurs, they won this trade hands down, very easy. You get to trade Fox without having to give up Stephon Castle or any major picks of consequence, and the Bulls, basically just kind of restock with a bunch of mid-level, starters, fringe bench players, and they already knew that that was the direction they were going to go. So for the Kings, you get Zach Lavine 5 years too late, but he's playing his best basketball now. So when we talk about this being a win now move, like I understand, and maybe in this short term right now, we're getting a player, at least on the offensive side, who is of equal or slightly better talent than Fox. So that trade off in general makes sense. But at the same time, and financially, they're both right around the same amount for their contract. So that also makes sense. So it's not like you're giving up a even bigger contract. So it's not great. I think we didn't get the best end of this trade because Lavine comes with, again, just so much short-term potential, but how much of a building block is Lavine going to be for the future? And I I'm excited to see what happens, and I'm very happy for Fox that he gets to go and have an opportunity to potentially play alongside a generational talent, and that can elevate his own career and gets him to multiple playoff appearances and get him in the spotlight that we always saw him in, deservedly so. But I'm sad, and I'm definitely, I'm disappointed. I know the past few weeks I've been talking about like I'm totally okay with them letting Fox go. I kind of want to see this, and obviously, like you said, with all the memories that you kind of think about, um, from the day we watched him get drafted, from all the buzzer beaters, like you said, from the magical playoff run where you're going toe to toe with Steph. Like you had all these moments here that were so good, and he ends up top 5 in every statistical category as a Sacramento King before leaving, and that's just something we're not accustomed to. So it's bittersweet. I'm happy for Fox. I'm sad, but I'm very interested to see how this Lavine experiment works, and if this is just part of something, just a stepping stone to something more that they're planning. We don't know. So far, I'm a little sad, but I am very curious to see how tomorrow goes because we're recording Tuesday. Lavine plays on Wednesday. Let's see how it goes. So that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, on a personal level, Zach Lavine's been one of my favorite players since he entered the league. You know that. A lot of people who we know that. I had a Zach Lavine Minnesota jersey way back in the day that went off on my ex's back over to Minnesota. And then I haven't seen that again, but that's okay. I'll have to get a Sacramento one.
That's
But
right.
Lavine is an exciting player. He is somebody who makes big shots. He takes big shots. He's not afraid of the moments. And one thing that you really highlighted really well was the offense. What you get in return. So obviously you lose a lot of offense and defense with Fox, but you gain the same amount of offense in a different way with Zach Lavine. but the defense is kind of the question mark, and that's going to be, interesting to see how Doug and the defensive system kind of, gets molded into Zach Lavine or vice versa, because that's going to be something we need to keep an eye on. Is he going to drop 40 points and we lose by 20, 130 to 150? Because we can't be giving up a ton of points like that. And when you look at the other night, obviously, De'Aaron Fox played his last game in OKC. The vibes were weird. I hate to use this game as an example, but you let this OKC team put up 144 points on you, and you yourself put up 110. When in a lot of ways, 110 should be close to getting the job done. If you lose by 5 points, it's understandable. But losing by 34 at that point, you start asking a lot of questions defensively. So the impact offensively, you're going to see some fun action on the offensive end. Zach Lavine loves getting downhill. He's similar to Fox in that way. But Fox had a couple different speeds. Zach Lavine is full speed pretty much all the time. And that's not a bad thing, but he finds himself in weird situations at times when he drives the lanes. He's not one to tend to look to dish the ball if he's in a weird spot. His tendency is to want to shoot out of it, which is fine because he makes a good clip of them. But understanding how he's going to fit in this system, I'm curious to see how he works alongside Domas, because we've seen so many great players come into Sacramento now. Even DeMar DeRozan, who at times it looks a little clunky, when he's in rhythm with the offense, and I'm not talking about, he's making shots. I'm talking about when he is flowing well with the system offensively. Him and Domas are so lethal together because DeMar just needs a breath of the basket, like just a glimpse of it, and he's fine. He's locked into it. And this is a similar style to Zach Lavine. Zach is a very similar player in that of DeMar DeRozan, and they just need to see the basket, just a glimpse of it. They need to see the ball go in a couple times, and everything opens up. So it's going to be fun to see how he's incorporated there and how quickly it happens, because obviously the aspirations based on this trade and potentially more to come, we'll talk about that in a sec, but the aspirations is to make the playoffs this year, to compete now. It is a win now window. That's why you make this trade. So I'm curious to see how quickly and he's able to get involved in the system and make a direct impact.
Yeah, and that's going to be the toughest part, right? And I do think offensively, especially with DeMar and Lavine playing multiple years together in Chicago, I do think that's going to help Lavine integrate a little bit faster because he has the familiarity with a guy like DeMar. Lavine seems like a very good locker room guy. A lot of guys have good things to say about him. So it'll be interesting to see. There's a lot of personality here in Sacramento. So if you're adding Lavine to the mix, it'll be interesting to see how much they can get these guys to buy in and really kind of accept the fact that he will be, the Fox first option base, because Lavine, no disrespect to Fox as a scorer or anything like that, but Lavine is the most potent 3-level scorer that has stepped on the court for Sacramento in a very long time. So I'm excited to see what he can do. I do think with Domas, him and Domas are going to have a lot of really good pick and pop action to get him open. He's going to find himself open a lot, and he hits very efficiently, especially from 3. So that's something that we're going to be more okay with Lavine shooting 11 threes a game than we were Fox shooting 11 threes a game. So it's going to open up our offense in a little bit. We're able to spread the floor a lot more. That might benefit us. So defensively, like you said, how quickly can Doug integrate him as a team player? Because we're not asking him to go one-on-one with the best offensive talent and say, hey, Zach Lavine's going to be the guy to stop you. But if when they play that nice zone and they can get everyone involved, I think Lavine is a capable enough defender to use his athleticism to stay in front of guys. So that's going to be interesting. And will our offense suffer? Will our offense, like you said, are we going to end up putting up 130 but losing 130, 150? Those are going to be the things to look out for. And it's going to be hard to ask them to do this in the middle of the season when we're in we're in the spot where we're 10th, and the Spurs, who we just traded Fox to, are only 2.5 games behind us at 12. So it's like we're in the middle of a hunt. Things have to go smooth here, because if we just go on a 5-game slump, we're going to be in trouble. So that's one of those things that we really have to try and avoid. And that's what's going to make this super, super exciting. So this is a good test for Doug, as a coach, as an interim coach. These are the things you're going to experience too. So this is going to be if he can make this work, if all of a sudden, everything kind of works out, Zach Lavine stays healthy, that's going to be a huge question mark as well. Can he stay healthy long enough to make this team work? If Doug, if he stays healthy and Doug gets the most out of these guys, and all of a sudden we elevate even further into the playoffs, Doug might earn himself a job. So it's one of those things where as a coach, he's motivated. I'm really excited to see what happens. But in terms of overall fit, I mean, nothing's really changed, right? And I think this is something that has bugged us this whole time. It's like, yeah, Zach Lavine is an awesome player, but like this is still we're still missing the same pieces. We're still missing wing players. We're still missing a big, like a backup big that's solid. Like we're still missing those foundational pieces that are going to elevate us even more into the legit team that we need to be. Zach Lavine is awesome and he could be great, but those are the things that still loom large here.
Yeah, and the part that concerns me is if we just think back for a second, the last 2 years at the trade deadline, um, you you would see one move and you would say we kind of talk amongst each other as fans and say, well, maybe this is a predecessor of another move. No, that was never the case. It was always a one and done. Like it was never a building block. Like the trade itself was pretty decent, in terms of what we saw before, but you didn't see the continuous building and building. So I'm concerned that obviously there are still the same pieces missing. You've made a trade, but it wasn't the trade you needed to make in a lot of ways. The trade you needed to make was always to bring in a wing for De'Aaron Fox, and it was always to bring in a backup center. And we still don't have those. And De'Aaron Fox is now out in San Antonio, where the San Antonio Spurs have just extended an offer to Brooklyn for one of our wing pieces that we have been in constant talks about for the last few months. Like De'Aaron Fox is really about to get that wing in San Antonio. Like that's concerning. So I'm worried because the last 2 days has been all quiet on the Western Front, and we haven't heard anything from this team. You can speculate, and we've seen and heard a lot of speculation amongst the Sacramento area here, but there's nothing for sure. You haven't heard that they are for sure talking to this team or that team for this player or that player, and we are 2 days away from the trade deadline, one day away when this pod comes out, and to not have really anything in the works at this point, at least out there, is concerning. Obviously, the Luka thing is a situation in and of itself. It makes you feel like you might not ever hear any rumblings, and all of a sudden your best players get traded. But with pieces like this, tinier pieces, not tinier, but smaller pieces, you expect to hear something, and we just haven't heard it. So I'm definitely concerned.
Yeah, so you mentioned something to me off the air here, about what the Kings plan on doing, the front office plans on doing in the next couple days here. You think with Monty potentially scheduling meetings to kind of clear the air about everything? You want to provide a little insight to that?
Yeah, so when this episode comes out, it'll be Wednesday morning. So I'm gonna speak in terms of that. So today, Wednesday, Monty is set to actually talk to the press, to the media for the first time in a number of months at 9:30 a.m. our time. So that's the first thing is he's going to address obviously the De'Aaron Fox trade. I am pretty sure they're going to ask him about the Mike Brown stuff that happened over a month ago at this point, because we still haven't gotten any clear indications of why any of that went down. So it'll be interesting to see what he has to say there. And then later on in the day at around 12:30, he will have a second press conference where he introduces Zach Lavine to Sacramento. And at that point, I think we'll hear 100% whether he's good to go for the game that night tonight, or if he's going to be waiting it another day or another game or so. So interesting things and fun things potentially happening tomorrow. It's going to be nice to actually hear from our general manager for the first time, and maybe get a little bit of insight into what this organization thinks. But yeah, it's to think about the fact that it took our star player getting traded and our coach getting fired for any of our management to take a podium and answer questions about it, other than just releasing an article that says thank you for your services. Basically, you're no longer with us. It's frustrating, and it just kind of plays into that, that whole story that the Kings organization is just incompetent and can't function at a high level.
Yeah, and I was watching NBA Today yesterday when the Fox had already been traded at this point, and they were discussing all sides of this trade, right? So they started with the Spurs getting Fox, then they started with the Bulls unloading Zach Lavine before talking about us getting Zach Lavine. And I think it just shows that, like, no matter what we do, you know we're the ones making the headlines, but nobody talked about why did the Kings do this. They're more like, oh, this is great for the Spurs and Wemby, and then they're talking about, oh, for the Bulls, what does it look for the future for the Kings? They're like, it's just the Kings, they're crazy, and we don't take them seriously, they don't take us seriously. And I think it's frustrating because now we're back in this, unless Levine pops off again and we're in a good spot where we make people pay attention again. That's the thing. We're an unserious team, and the way that our front office management like handles issues is very not serious, and it is concerning. So it'll be interesting to see what he has to say. It's going to be very important to listen to what he has to say, because how they choose to approach the situation is going to be, indicative of how they truly feel about the roster that they have here and what they plan on doing in the future. So I'm disappointed that like it basically felt like they were trying to get rid of these pieces that they didn't feel like were going to fit. And like, listen, this is where I want to like, I don't know how to feel, because I watched the Mavericks, the Luka trade of it all, right? When that went down, everything was discussed in secret. They said that, no one knew anything about this. LeBron didn't know, none of the players knew. It was between Pelinka and Harrison. So I was like, part of me was like, how would it have felt as a fan base had it been in the reverse for the Kings, had Foxy just like had all those talks just gone under the radar and nobody knew, you know, and things still kind of happen, like we're still getting blown out and things like that, and then the Kings pull the trigger without telling anybody until that day, just like how that would be. Because we kind of got two different sides. Foxy last week, it was announced that his names was in trade talks and stuff like that. It was very public and open. And I think, yeah, the Luka trade is a little more shocking to all the players and the fans and the organization and things like that. But like from a business side of things, I feel like that's almost the way to go. For especially when you have a player, as when it's your franchise guy, why bring all the attention to the fact that, hey, it's your franchise guy that you're trying to unload? Because no one expected Luka to be touchable forever. So these are the things that I was thinking about when the trade was going down.
So I like that point. I'm going to argue it for the sense of you got to consider the timeline for both organizations. The Mavericks have, for all intents and purposes, are a successful franchise. They have championships, they have championship windows, they have great players, they know how to build teams, they've done it before. And they tend to exercise good company organization practices. Whereas the Sacramento Kings do not, and they haven't done any of that. They've done the polar opposite of what the Mavs have done. So if you were to take that same situation and the Sacramento Kings trade De'Aaron Fox out of nowhere, it's not going to be a smart business decision or viewed that way in Sacramento's eyes, and for the rest of the NBA looking at Sacramento, because they're just going to lump it into, well, they made a rash decision to fire Mike Brown, and they just made another rash decision to move on from De'Aaron Fox. They would never take into account the fact that, it would keep vibes up until it happens, and then, new energy shift, and, it will just kind of build off of that. No, it would always just continue to be that narrative of, here we go, Sacramento Kings doing another dumb thing out of nowhere, just, out of spite for whatever reason. So I think that's I get where you're coming from. And I personally think the Kings handled it as well as they could have. And I think they probably got the best return they could have at the same time, because San Antonio had that leverage. But now it's on them to build off of this trade. You have to make a good move, not just a move. You can't just make a move here to try and justify what you just did. You have to make a good move. And that's what's going to be key in the next day and a half here to see moving forward.
Honestly, I do think that's a really good point. I do think, because Sacramento's just been a dumpster fire for so many years, I don't think we would get that benefit of the doubt. Um, but it is just sad. At the end of the day, we wanted it to work with Foxy, but in this business, it just doesn't work. And listen, the Mavs did the same thing. They're like, listen, we don't want to commit $350 million to Luka, and maybe that's going to end up biting them in the butt, and maybe LA is just going to benefit from it and created a villain that is going to ruin the NBA for the next decade. But you know that sometimes those are the risks that you have to take, and it'll be very interesting to see for all of these teams that make a trade, because for the Kings it was our franchise guy, for the Mavs it was theirs. It'll be very interesting to see when you look back how both of these teams are set up. So one last thing before we move on here to some football talk. What do you expect from Zach Lavine's addition to the team? Like, what do you expect him to do? What are you wanting to see from him game one when he plays?
I expect his offense to be an immediate factor, because one of the things that's been missing with this team, off and on this season, has been the shooting. And one thing that, unless this organization is truly cursed, one thing that he's going to bring to the team is an effective field goal percentage and an effective shot. And that's something that, is that we need to be able to rely on down the stretch. We did last night, with DeMar DeRozan, or Monday night with DeMar DeRozan down the stretch. He was a key factor in how we were able to get that win in Minnesota. And that's going to be something that I'm looking for, is how quickly is he incorporated into the offense. Obviously the defense is going to take time, because the defense is still taking time. It's still not set. And so I'm looking for more of an immediate presence offensively. That's where I want to see Zach kind of thrive and find his fit initially.
Yeah, I wouldn't be upset if he just kind of went all systems go and just went for it. Just at this point, if you're trying to find your groove with the team, might as well play the way you're wanting to play, and the coach can coach around that, or the players can get used to that. It's going to take some getting used to. I'm sure we're going to see a couple awkward possessions where the guys are kind of like, oh, here, Zach, do what you want to do, and he's like, okay, let me do what I want to do. So it'll be interesting to see how, or if they just say, hey, you're going to do this, just follow DeMar basically, and he'll lead you down the path. So it'll be interesting. I do expect that. I kind of just want to see him feel comfortable to just do what he does best, and hopefully it makes an impact. I'm excited to see it. So, any final thoughts on the Kings before we switch on over here?
No, let's just let's Zach, what is it? Zach Ramento oh, there was this thing. It was like a Zach light the beam thing, because it's
Yeah, yeah,
Lavine.
yeah.
Anyway, I'm not even gonna try it. I'm excited. Like I said, I'm excited for Zach Lavine. I'm excited to see how this team operates with him. But you're not done. You can't be done. You have to make a good move. One more, at least, good move before the trade
Yeah,
deadline.
try and build out this roster as much as you can to make a playoff push. So we will see. Hopefully, we'll see what kind of name Mark Jones gives Zach Lavine in the broadcast. I'm excited to see how that works out. But I'm excited to see this team. This is what we have now. So there's no looking back. We kind of just have to take it on the chest and go for it. So we'll see what happens. But all right, y'all, we are going to pivot on to some football. So give us 1 second. We'll be right back. All right, we're back to talk some ELGLES Eagles. Wait, hold up. That's right, we're talking some Eagles, baby. So, obviously, big days here. On Sunday, it's going to be the Super Bowl against the Kansas City Chiefs. It's already media day. We're recording on Tuesday, so they've done the initial stuff. We had a lot of fun little nuggets there from the players. Patrick Mahomes saying his favorite color is green, Saquon saying his favorite color is red. Like, I don't know what the hell's going on here. So, in terms of the injury report for Philadelphia, obviously it's Tuesday. There's still a lot subject to change, but I saw this video from Zach Berman, who is one of the beat writers very close to the Eagles. He's around the facility every day. He says that all of the starters should be good to go. He said that had, Cam Jurgens and Landon Dickerson, if the game was this weekend, they would have played, even though they're, a little dinged up. So they're not going to be 100%, but we should see the starters out there, all 22 outside of Nakobe Dean, so Oren Burks, but he's been starting all playoffs. So outside of that, all those guys should be in there. So really excited. We got a lot of fun, matchups to talk about. So I wanted to start there. I wanted to start with just breaking down some of the matchups that we think are going to stand out in this Super Bowl. So Ben, what would be, we're just going to do three each from, now I'm not going to say least important, but our third most important, second most important, first. So what is the third matchup you're looking out for in this game?
So the third matchup for me is Kellen Moore versus Spagnola. I watched Spags light us up 2 times, and it's at this point it's safe to say he brings a game plan into every single game, and some of his best game plans come in the playoffs and in the Super Bowl. And that's something that I'm definitely keeping an eye on in terms of how, if he's able to, really force Kellen Moore outside of, what he wants in terms of comfortability, right? And if you can kind of force a game plan or force a team outside of their normal game plan, that's when things start to get kind of hairy. So I'm keeping an eye on that matchup, and that's probably my number 3.
For me, I had that as my number two. I think that, this is Kellen Moore's audition. As much this playoffs have been his audition to his potential head coaching gig. Um, he surprised us last week with just a lot of fun, a much cleaner offensive game. And I'm really interested to see, like, this is a huge game. Spagnuolo, when the Eagles played Spags last time, they were able to put up 35 points. Obviously, the defense was the issue in the 2022 game, but the offense wasn't that big of an issue. And this is, again, not much of the players on this roster for Kansas City has changed. It's just the fact that they were all younger, and now they're definitely much more familiar with the system. So this is going to be a tougher defense that we're facing. But this isn't a defense that, for me, like, I'm not going to say scares me. They were a top 5 scoring defense all year. They're a very effective defense. They have game breakers like Chris Jones, Karlaftis. That old defensive line is good. Their linebackers are solid, and they have good corners. But the question is, will they be able to stop Saquon? And how often? And the thing with what I've noticed this year with Kellen Moore and Nick Sirianni and this team, which I really hope they just continue to do, I think especially since we've been playing this Kansas City Chiefs team multiple times, once the past 2 years, and one thing that I've noticed this team this year that they've been able to do that I don't think they're going to change for the Chiefs is that they've just stuck with their guns. Saquon Barkley is going to be the main piece of this offense that they're going to try and feed in any way, shape, or form. And the Eagles, Nick Sirianni, we run into this. The teams that haven't beaten the Chiefs or struggle to beat the Chiefs, they get in their head. Like, you watch the Bills throw the ball way more than they should. You watch the Niners kind of go out of some of their game plans. Like, things change a little bit when you see Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid on the other side. But the Eagles, they don't feel that way. They're not going to change for anybody. And I think that we're going to see Saquon needs to touch the ball at least 20 times in this game if we want to just establish who we are, even if it's not going to work out that well. This defense, this freaking defense has done a great job of holding running backs, especially in the postseason, under 100 yards. They're at 18 straight games with under 25 yards, 25 if you include the regular season. So Spags knows how to stop. He knows how to stop running backs. So it'll be very interesting to see what we draw up and if we're going to be able to attack that. So Kellen Moore, he's going to be, all eyes are going to be on him and Nick Sirianni. People can say Jalen Hurts all he wants. I do kind of include Jalen Hurts in that bucket because, he's going to have to be the one executing the plays. There's a lot on the line for this offense because they're going to be the biggest, they're going to be a very important part to, can we hang with this team if all of a sudden the Chiefs find a way around this defense. So we'll see. That I have that at my number 2.
Yeah, and Jalen Hurts is my number 2. I'll kind of build off that because one thing I'm keeping an eye on is Jalen Hurts against some of that pressure, and if he's able to kind of escape out of there and use his legs like we know he can. I always make that comment to you that he's so great with his legs. Well, he is great with his legs, and his ability to extend drives, extend plays, and keep things alive for his team is going to be key in this one because it's going to be drawn up to if it's to stop Saquon Barkley, then the next best thing is to stop Jalen Hurts, and you best believe that Jalen's going to start seeing a lot of pressure as the game progresses, and there are going to be times where he sees pressure and he needs to make very fast decisions, and that's kind of what I'm keeping my eye on in this one. Obviously, the last game in the NFC Championship, he was phenomenal. He played one of his best games that I've seen him play in his career. And that's something that he has to continue to build on. And I have all the faith that he can. I've seen it this year. But it's a big one for me in this is how do you handle that pressure in the biggest stage? Because in the biggest stage last time, he did throw that pick. It was the lone pick of the game, but nonetheless, it was a pick and it was an under pressure pick. So are you able to learn from that last game? Are you able to dial it back, kind of calm down and just take what's given to you? And that's simply all Jalen Hurts kind of needs to do is whatever is handed to him, whatever is available, he can execute because he has the ability to do everything. He can run, he can pass, he can go deep, he can go with the short stuff, he can go just over the linebackers between the safeties and the DBs. Like it's all available to him. And it's going to be reliant on him to make the proper reads. So I'm really watching him in this one.
That's a great point. So my other matchup, and this goes for both teams because both of these teams can excel at this position if things go the way that they want them to. And that comes from the matchups from both the Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs tight end position versus the linebacking cores of both of these teams. So Dallas Goedert and Travis Kelce are both extremely efficient, and they have dominated this year against linebackers. And both of these teams on both sides of the ball, the Eagles and the Chiefs, struggle against tight ends. And I do think that this is going to be a matchup that we're going to see both of these teams try to hunt those guys early and see if they can take advantage of that. So those are going to be the guys to look out for me. They're my third matchup. So I definitely, because all it takes is one big Travis Kelce play and him and Mahomes are locked in step on fire, whatever flame, you want to put on. And it's going to be really hard to stop them. So that's definitely something I'm looking out for.
So my number one, I know you already know who this is centered around. It's the guy who's been carrying this team all season long. Saquon Barkley versus that Kansas City run defense. And I know that was on your list as well. For me, it's number one because I'm genuinely curious to see how they approach stopping Saquon Barkley. And one thing to keep in mind is Kansas City's run defense is decent. They're better than decent, actually. The Chiefs rank third in the NFL in efficiency versus the expected against the run. And one thing that you got to kind of keep an eye on and account for is if Saquon starts to find a rhythm in this one, I don't think the Eagles are going to look back. And I think that's got to be a point of emphasis for the Chiefs in this game. When you've watched how the Eagles have won games all season long, it's been utilizing Jalen Hurts in the run game, Saquon Barkley in the run game, but even Jalen Hurts at times too. And that constant pressure that Saquon is putting on defenses is just no joke. It's something that if Kansas City doesn't have this as their number one priority going into this game, they are not going to win this game. They will not be able to compete and keep up with what Saquon is capable of doing. I think if Saquon has a good game, he's got 2 touchdowns in this game. If Saquon has a great game, plays one of his best ever, he could easily put up 4 touchdowns. And that's not even like joking. I'm not, exaggerating. This is what he's capable of doing. He hasn't played on a stage like this before. He is hungry. He is absolutely as hungry as he's ever been for this moment. You don't think he's going to come ready? Because I do.
Oh, yeah. And it's on his birthday, too. Him and Cooper DeJean are twins. They're celebrating the birthday on Super Bowl Sunday, so that would be a really cool thing. Also, Saquon just got engaged, so I think the vibes are up for him, too. So he's in a good spot, and he's definitely the player to look out for. He will be like the biggest difference. Like, if he's able to explode and break off at least 1 or 2 huge runs in this game, that could make all the difference. And when we talk about my number one matchup, it has to be this Vic Fangio defense as a whole versus this offense. And Andy Reid is unbelievable off of buys. We already know he has this insane record, and he is unbelievable. He's the 2 weeks to game plan. And Vic Fangio against Patrick Mahomes has not had that much success. Ben told me this off the pod, but I was aware of this as well. It's, he's 0-8 against Patrick Mahomes in his career. And when you got to take context into that, part of that was, he was spent a lot of time in Denver, and they didn't have the same level of defense. You go to,
So I do actually have that. So
okay.
6 of those were with Denver, twice with Miami. So, he didn't have the best situations.
Yeah, and he made the most out of, he made the most with what he had, especially Miami last year. They were hurt. They were banged up. They had like 17 starters missing last year. So it was like they were dealing with a lot, and they that's what you get. So there's a little bit of context there. So when you look at the quality of this Eagles defense that he has now at his disposal, will this version of his defense be able to get over the hump? But Mahomes is the kind of player who will kill you in any way possible. It does not matter. This dude finds any which way, whatever to win. He will go short, long, medium, whatever it takes, and he'll have a back-breaking run or two each and every game. So it's going to take a lot of discipline, and this is a young team, and this is a defense that's going to be tested. You have two rookie corners out there, and you have a second-year defensive tackle who as your main leaders in this thing. So it's going to be interesting, but I do think this team is capable of winning. I do think this defense is going to find a way to figure out Mahomes. And at least the question is the biggest thing for both of these teams is who's going to win this turnover battle. Neither one of these teams has turned the ball over in the playoffs. So when you talk about just coming into this game, both teams playing at the most efficient that they can be, both teams are locked in. It's going to take one of these teams, one of these defenses to step up and make a big play. And I want to say whoever creates the first turnover might be able to generate that momentum that carries them the rest of the way. So it'll be interesting to see. But I'm really excited, dude. There's so much we could talk about. There's a lot at stake. There's a lot of legacies. I'm gonna take the biggest victory lap if Jalen Hurts wins the freaking Super Bowl. I'm really excited for what's at stake. But the Eagles are going up against history. The Eagles are going up against a potential three-peat that has never been done before in the NFL. So it's there's going to be a lot, and Saquon will, so long as he gets 30 yards, which I'm not going to say anything, but so long as he gets 30 yards, he will surpass Terrell Davis for the all-time rushing record for regular season and postseason. So we will see how that works. So there's a lot of fun little storylines here, a lot of little nuggets. So I'm definitely interested to see what's at stake. But if you had to give me a score, what would it be for the Super Bowl?
I'm going to say 31-28 Kansas City.
Okay.
I think I think that the Chiefs, look, I can't bet against the Chiefs. Like it's been like this now for a number of years where I've taken the other team against the Chiefs because I'm like, well, everything's stacked against them. And I've seen now, two Super Bowls, both against the Eagles and the Niners last year, where the Chiefs won and they weren't the better team. And I've got to kind of take that into account because this is kind of the same situation where I genuinely believe the Eagles are the better team in this. But it really boils down to like the final execution of it all. And that's where I'm keeping an eye on. Like, in terms of the coaching, in terms of the matchups, everything's got to be perfect for either one of these teams. And if I had to bank on one team being absolutely perfect at the biggest stage, it's going to be the team that's been there the most. And that's kind of where my head's at now. It's not to say that I'm rooting for the Chiefs by any means, because I want to see the Eagles win. I don't want to see that freaking three-peat. Call it what you want. Maybe I'm just trying to jinx them. I don't know. But genuinely, I find it very hard to to bet against the Chiefs at this point.
No, and that's totally fair. And you had mentioned this when the Bills played the Chiefs. You were like, the Bills need to win big if they want to win they need to win by at least 2 scores if you want to beat the Chiefs. The Eagles, I think, are going to have to kind of do the same thing. But I do think, like I said, they're not going to change who they are for the Chiefs. So they're in a position where they probably can, so long as they force a turnover and hold the lead and Saquon, takes over the game. That'll be the biggest thing. My score is going to be 33-27 Philly. And I think that when it comes down to 6 points, it's going to be the Chiefs scoring with like a minute and a half to go. They were going to be down 14 plus. They get the 2-point conversion, but then they fail the onside kick and then the Eagles win. And that's kind of where I feel that would go, where Mahomes will not have the ball last to win the game. And if we're in that position, I can't say that I'm that confident in it, but maybe we'll see what happens. But 33-27 will be my final score.
It's going to be a hell of a game, dude. Like, nonetheless, it's exciting. Kendrick Lamar is doing the halftime show. I'm stoked for that. I'm a big Kendrick Lamar fan. I know you are too.
It's gonna be lit.
It's got everything. It's got everything stacking up to be one of the best Super Bowls in a long time. And this is, it's I'm amazed that the Super Bowl is here at this point. I can't believe that we got here as quickly as we did, because it feels like just the other day we were prepping for the Eagles in Brazil and the Niners against the Jets in Week 1, and here we are talking about the Eagles going to the Super Bowl.
Just like
So
I planned,
look,
baby.
man, it's been a hell of a season. Yeah, just like you planned. Like, it's been a hell of a season. Ended on a high note. Like, you need it at this point.
It'd be very cool to witness, 2 Super Bowls in 7 years. That would be something that would be very cool. I would I
I just
feel
want one.
I know. I hate that's, if that's how it ends, I would hate that partially for you in that sense. And I, now then I would just pull for the Niners a little bit more. I'm like, I got mine, maybe, it's time for some other people to get it, but it's going to be a big game. No matter what happens, I'm going to accept it. There's going to be something crazy. There's going to be, there's potential for anything. So, I just hope for the best. I just hope for a good game. The past 2 Eagles Super Bowls, they've been great games. That game against the Patriots was a wonderful game. And, the Chiefs game was a good game. So I just hope that the Eagles, just deliver another great game and just put it all out there. And hopefully it ends up as a win this time. All right, buddy. Do you got any final thoughts before we head out here?
No final thoughts from me. I guess I do got one.
Okay.
Saquon. It's a hot take. I think Saquon's going for 300. And that's the only way that the Eagles can win this game, is Saquon's got to go for 300.
Yard, like rushing specifically, or total?
Total yards.
Okay.
It'll be total yards. But look, he's going to be involved in a major way in this game, and it's probably not going to be 300. But if I'm being 100% honest, I would not be surprised if Saquon goes for like total yards, probably 200, but rushing yards were around like 150. I think that sounds right in this game. That sounds right for what this, Kansas City team could let up if the Eagles are fully locked into their game plan and Saquon's operating on an all-time level.
That's right. And final thoughts, Jalen Hurts is going to win Super Bowl MVP, in my opinion. That'll be my bold take, and he will lead this team to a Super Bowl win, baby. That's what I'm hoping for. And maybe Brandon Graham plays one of his 10 snaps and gets a strip sack. That'd be cool for him to play after, 2 months. So that'll be very interesting to see if he actually gets on the field. But it's just good to have everybody there. The vibes are up in Philly, so we'll see what happens.
Yes, sir.
All right, y'all. We'll end it right here. Good luck. I hope everybody has a fun weekend, enjoys the Super Bowl, enjoys the Kendrick Lamar halftime. That's going to be really fun. I'm excited for that too. With that being said, this is episode 76 of the Behind the Back podcast. You can hit us up at behindthebackpod13@gmail.com. Hit us up on any of our social medias that are located up above for all you audio listeners out there. The links to the descriptions are down below. Please give us a like, subscribe, rate, follow, review, comment. We appreciate it. Who do you guys think is going to win the Super Bowl? Please leave comments below in our YouTube section or any one of our social medias, because we will be posting clips during the week. So my name is Marcos Conde Negron, and beside me here, as always, is
Ben the Jet Rats.
That's right, y'all. We love y'all. We will talk to you next week. Hopefully I'm doing a post game on Sunday that requires a Super Bowl win, so I'm excited, y'all. Talk to you next week. Peace.